My name is Sarah Whitman, and if you'd asked me a month ago who I was, I'd have said, just an ordinary woman with a perfect marriage and a very needy golden retriever. But ask me tonight, alone in this cold, echoing house, and I'm not so sure anymore. Tonight, I'm the woman whose husband disappeared behind a taxi window, suitcase in hand, with a promise. It's only 2 weeks, babe. I'll call every night. You'll be fine. He lied. I wasn't fine. And honestly, I was starting to wonder if I'd ever be fine again. The house felt wrong the minute Mark's taillights vanished down the street. Too still. Too silent. I never realized how much sound one man could bring to a home. Clinking mugs, humming in the hallway, even his snoring that used to drive me crazy. Without him, every shadow pressed in close. Every clock tick was an accusation. You're alone, and maybe that should have scared me more. But the worst part? The thing I hated to admit, even to myself? I was relieved. For just a second, standing at the frosted window, I exhaled. No pressure to be anyone's perfect wife. No small talk. No pretending I was never lonely or tired or secretly afraid of the dark. Just me, in this too big house. Me and a furry head butted my leg. I glanced down to see Max, my golden retriever, already staring up with big liquid eyes. He'd watched Mark go too, ears low, tail limp, as if he knew that something important had shifted. I'd rescued Max 3 years ago after my mother died. He'd been my grief shadow, the first heartbeat I felt at home after so much loss. But tonight, Max felt less like a comfort and more like a responsibility. I dropped a hand to his soft head, forcing a smile. Looks like it's just you and me, buddy. He licked my palm, desperate. I tried to laugh, but it came out thin and strained. I was used to being alone for a night or two. Mark's work trips were nothing new. But 2 weeks? In January? The sky was already black by 4 in the afternoon, the windows sweating cold and the wind howling against the glass. All the little noises in the house seemed amplified, the icebox clunk, the radiator's sigh, the dull drone of my own thoughts. The first evening, I cooked dinner for one out of habit and left half of it on the stove. I tried to watch TV, flipping mindlessly through show after show, but the living room felt cavernous without Mark's sarcastic commentary. Max curled at my feet, shifting every time I moved, like he thought I might vanish too. By 9 p.m., I was pacing. The silence was a living thing crawling up the walls. I called Mark just to hear his voice, but he was still at the airport, half listening, distracted. "You'll be fine, babe," he said again, then, "Give Max a belly rub for me." The camera call cut out before I could say anything real. I stared at my phone for a long minute, then set it face down on the coffee table. It buzzed twice. Work emails, not worth opening. Max stared at me, head cocked. I swallowed, suddenly aware of how tight my chest felt. My mother used to say, "If you don't fill a house with noise, it'll fill you with ghosts." Tonight, I could almost see them. Ghosts of arguments past, of birthdays spent quietly, of moments when I'd felt more like a roommate than a wife. Maybe that's why, when the tears came, I didn't even try to stop them. It started with a sniffle, then a choked little gasp. My hands shook as I braced them against the kitchen counter, breath coming in shallow waves. I felt stupid, crying because my husband was gone for a few nights, crying because I was scared of my own house. Max appeared at my side, bumping his head into my hip with unexpected force. He whined, pawing at my arm. "Go lay down, Max," I said, voice barely above a whisper. He didn't move. Instead, he nudged my hand until my fingers curled instinctively into his fur. He pressed closer, pinning me between the counter and his warm, golden body, refusing to let me go. I tried to laugh at the absurdity of it. A grown woman, cornered by her dog, sobbing over something she couldn't even name. But Max just stared at me, big brown eyes unwavering. It was like he knew. And God, that made it worse, or maybe it made it better. I slid down to the kitchen floor back against the cabinets, and Max lay down, too, half on top of me, all one solid, gentle weight. He licked a tear off my cheek, whining softly, and I broke. I buried my face in his ruff, sobbing in great silent heaves, all the fear and loneliness pouring out at once. We stayed like that a long time, until the kitchen tile pressed cold through. My jeans and the crying finally stopped. I don't know how long we sat there. Long enough for my phone to buzz again and again. Texts from Mark, probably. Or maybe just more reminders of the outside world I didn't want right now. Eventually, I dragged myself up feeling sheepish. Come on, Max. Let's try for bed. I tried to act normal. Brushed my teeth, changed into pajamas, pulled the comforter tight around my shoulders. Max followed me to the bedroom, tail wagging uncertainly. He stopped at the threshold, looking up at me for permission. I hesitated. Mark never let him in the bed. He said the dog took up too much room, but the emptiness was a physical ache, one I didn't want to face alone. Okay, I whispered. Just this once. Max jumped up, circling 3 times before settling right in Mark's spot. Head on the pillow, one paw stretched over my stomach. His weight pressed comfort into my bones, the steady rise and fall of his chest oddly soothing. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, listening to Max breathe. Somewhere in the darkness, the house creaked and moaned, but I didn't feel so hollow anymore. I stroked his fur, soft and warm, and let my eyes drift closed. Maybe this was all it took. Not a husband's presence, not another human heartbeat, but something loyal and loving and impossibly here. Tomorrow I'd have to face the world again. I'd have to answer Mark's calls, pretend I was doing fine, try not to break apart every time the wind rattled the windows. But tonight, Max had taken Mark's place. And for the first time, I wasn't afraid to let him. I woke to the weight of someone beside me. For a single, wild second, I thought Mark had come home early, that the last 24 hours had only been a bad dream, that I'd open my eyes and see him, rumpled and smiling, ready with his old joke. You drool on the pillow again? But it wasn't Mark. It was Max, sprawled across the comforter, his golden fur shining in the thin winter light that leaked through the blinds. One big paw draped over my legs, his head pressed into the spot where Mark's pillow had been. The rise and fall of his breath was steady, grounding. For a moment, I just watched him sleep. How strange, I thought, that a dog could fill this space so completely. How strange, too, that I didn't hate it. As if sensing my thoughts, Max stirred. He blinked up at me, brown eyes bright and searching, and then licked my hand where it rested, on the bedspread. I smiled, weak but real. The ache in my chest wasn't gone, but it was quieter. Hey, buddy, I whispered. His tail thumped softly against the covers. There was something surreal about that first morning alone, about the way Max had simply taken over. No questions asked, as if he'd always belonged here. I rolled out of bed, and Max followed, sticking so close his nose bumped the back of my knee as I shuffled into the kitchen. Coffee for me, kibble for him. The routine felt half familiar, half unreal. I was still pouring hot water into my mug when my phone rang. Mark. I let it buzz 3 times, before answering, wiping sleep from my eyes. Morning, I said, aiming for cheerful. He sounded tired or maybe distracted. Did you sleep okay? I glanced at Max, still watching me, still impossibly present. Yeah, I lied. Max kept me company. There was a pause. You let him in the bed, didn't you? I laughed, trying to sound casual. Maybe. Don't be jealous. Mark made a noise halfway between a snort and a sigh. He'll get used to it, you know. You'll never get rid of him now. I wanted to say, that's the point, but I bit. My tongue. Anyway, I've got to go. Meetings all day. Love you, Sarah. Love you too, I replied, but it sounded smaller than it used to. I set my phone face down on the table, feeling suddenly exposed. The quiet in the house seemed sharper now, more aware of me. Max pressed his head against my leg, demanding attention. Okay, I said, ruffling his ears. Let's get moving. I tried to fill the day. Laundry, dishes, emails. Every step I took, Max followed, a silent golden shadow. When I went upstairs to clean, he climbed each step with exaggerated care, as if worried I'd vanish if he lost sight of me for even a second. When I tried to shower, he nosed the bathroom door until I gave up and let him in. He sat on the bath mat, head tilted, eyes fixed on me as if he could see straight through the fog of my thoughts. I laughed, almost despite myself. Do you have to watch me every second? His tail wagged, a soft, thumping answer. The morning blurred into afternoon, and the hours seemed to slow. I tried reading but couldn't focus. I scrolled through social media, feeling a pang of envy at the bright, smiling faces, families together, couples at brunch, friends traveling somewhere, sunlit. My life, by comparison, felt faded, like a black and white photograph in a world that had moved on to color. Max nudged my elbow as if reminding me I wasn't really alone. I snapped a photo of him, tongue lolling, and posted it with a caption I hoped sounded light. When your husband's away and your dog won't leave your side. Pretty sure he's planning a takeover. Dog days. Who needs men? Almost instantly the likes rolled in. Friends and strangers, all eager to comment on the absurdity. Let him, he's cuter anyway. Dogs, men, fight me. I smiled, but the laughter didn't quite reach my chest. Around 3, the phone rang again. This time it was my sister. Are you okay? She asked, voice sharp with concern. You sound weird in your messages. I almost denied it, but the words slipped out anyway. I just feel off. Like, the house is too big and too quiet. I keep thinking I hear things. She paused, then said, That's normal. I hated it when Mike used to travel too. At least you have Max. I looked at the dog, now sprawled across my feet like a living rug. Yeah, he's been intense. He won't let me out of his sight. My sister laughed. That's a good dog. Let him protect you. Let him keep you company. You'll get through it, Sarah. You always do. But when the call ended, the heaviness returned. I tried to ignore it, made myself a sandwich, left the crusts for Max. It was as if he could sense every flicker of unease, every ghost of fear I tried to swallow down. By the time darkness crept over the windows, I was on edge again, every little noise making my heart jump. I wanted to call Mark, but he'd sent a text saying he'd be working late. Don't wait up. Love you. It felt like a cliché, and it stung more than I wanted to admit. That evening, the wind howled harder than before, rattling the old window panes. I curled up on the couch, blanket pulled tight, TV flickering in the background just to drown out the silence. Max pressed himself along my legs, his warmth seeping into my bones. Halfway through a rerun I'd seen a dozen times, my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. I froze, stomach twisting, but let it go to voicemail. After that, I couldn't concentrate. I turned the TV off and just listened. The house creaked and moaned with the wind, and every sound felt like a threat. Max picked up on my tension instantly. He sat upright, ears pricked, body tense. For a moment, I worried he'd start barking, but instead he did something stranger. He nudged my hand until I set down my phone, then climbed right up beside me on the couch, wedging himself between me and the armrest. I couldn't help but laugh, startled and grateful. You big baby, I whispered, and wrapped my arms around him. But he just leaned in harder, as if his very presence could drive away the fear. I sat there for a long time, clutching Max, breathing, in his warm, doggy smell. The storm outside raged louder, but inside, with him pressed close, I started to believe I'd make it through the night. When I finally stood up, ready to call it a day, Max refused to let me out of his sight. I brushed my teeth with one hand on his head. When I climbed into bed, he leapt up after me, curling into the same spot he'd claimed the night before. I lay there, heart pounding, watching the shadows chase each other across the ceiling. I reached out, fingers buried in Max's thick fur, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I didn't dread the darkness. I wasn't alone. Not really. As sleep tugged at me, I felt Max's breathing slow, his body relaxing into mine. Tomorrow might be harder, I knew. The loneliness wasn't gone, just hidden. But tonight, I let myself believe that Max could keep the worst of it at bay. That maybe, just maybe, he'd keep the ghosts out long enough for me to find my way back to myself. I drifted off with Max's heartbeat thudding steady against my side, and when I woke in the darkness, half dreaming and reaching for comfort, he was still there. He wouldn't let me wake up alone. There's a strange, invisible line that gets crossed when you start talking to your dog the way you'd talk to a person. Full sentences, real secrets, whispered confessions you'd never admit to anyone else. Maybe it's the loneliness. Maybe it's the way silence swells in a house when the only other heartbeat you can hear is your own. By the third day, Max wasn't just my comfort. He was my audience, my anchor, and my shadow. If he'd been able to talk back, I think I might have told him everything. I started narrating my life out loud, just to keep the walls from closing in. Max, what do you think? Oatmeal or eggs for breakfast? He'd cock his head, tail thumping, every bit as serious as if I'd asked for investment advice. Should I wear the blue sweater or the gray one? A bark for blue, a nose nudge for gray. Some mornings I changed outfits just to see if he'd react. When the anxiety crept in, sharp, sudden, icy, I'd find Max and press my face into his fur, breathing him in until my heart slowed. When memories of old arguments with Mark flickered at the edge of sleep, I'd tell Max stories about my childhood, my mother's laugh, the way I always felt safest in the stable with horses, not people. One night, just after midnight, I found myself telling Max a secret I'd never told Mark, not even on our honeymoon, when secrets felt light as sand. Sometimes I'm scared, I whispered into the dark, that if Mark really knew how fragile I am, he wouldn't love me anymore. Max licked my cheek and curled closer, as if to say, "You're safe here." It's strange, the ways we let ourselves unravel when no one's watching. By the next morning, Max had memorized my routine. He knew when I'd check my phone, when I'd glance at the window, when my breath would catch because a neighbor's car door slammed or a floorboard creaked. He anticipated my moods with an accuracy that startled me. It was more than simple loyalty. It was as if he was filling in the cracks Mark left behind. I started filming little videos, snippets of our new life together. I'd talk to the camera, explaining Max's quirks, my fears, our midnight routines. There was something raw and honest about speaking to strangers on the internet, as if saying it out loud made the fear smaller. I posted a clip on TikTok. When your husband leaves and your dog decides he's the man of the house. Seriously, he follows me everywhere. He even guards the bathroom door. Is this normal? The comments poured in. He's protecting you? Best kind of man, TBH. Dogs always know when you need them. Let him take care of you. Some were teasing, some supportive, some so understanding I felt my heart crack open. By the end of the day, my little video had gone viral. 20,000 likes, hundreds of comments. Strangers shared their own stories. Dogs who guarded them. Through heartbreak, dogs who slept in their husbands' places after breakups or divorce. I read every single comment, hungry for connection, letting their warmth seep into the parts of me that still ached. I started filming more. Max, helping me make dinner, pawing at the counter, drooling hopefully. Max curled up in Mark's spot on the couch, head propped on a pillow. Max following me up the stairs, refusing to let me out of sight. "He's literally your shadow," someone commented, and it stuck. Evening settled in with a storm. I'd always hated thunder. One of those irrational fears I never shook from childhood, when my father would shout and slam doors. Mark usually teased me for it, or sometimes, if he was in the right mood, he'd hold me until the storm passed. But now it was just me and Max. The first crash rattled the windows and sent my nerves jangling. I froze on the stairs, one hand clutching the banister, heart racing. Max was beside me in a flash, tail up, body tense. I tried to fake bravery, but my voice trembled. "It's okay, bud. Just thunder. Nothing to be scared of." But he wasn't fooled. He trotted ahead into the bedroom, then turned and barked softly until I followed. As soon as I sat on the bed, another roll of thunder shook the house. Max jumped up, planted himself squarely across my lap, his whole weight, all muscle and fur, pinning me in place. I laughed, shaky but grateful. You're crushing me, big guy. He didn't budge. Instead, he pressed his head against my chest as if to absorb my fear. I wrapped my arms around him, felt his heart thumping as hard as mine. We sat like that until the storm passed, Max's presence a barricade between me and the old ghosts that always seemed to slip in with the rain. I checked my phone afterward, thumb hovering over Mark's number. I wanted to call him, to hear his voice, to admit how much I still struggled with the simplest things when he was gone. But then I saw his text. Working late, babe. Don't wait up. Love you. The ache inside me deepened. Max nuzzled my hand, pulling me back to the present. That night, as I filmed a sleepy update for my followers, Max stretched his head onto my shoulder. He's seriously attached, I told the camera. I think he thinks he's my husband. Now. The video got 500,000 views. You two are soulmates. That's not a dog, that's a therapy husband. He knows you need him more than anyone else right now. I read the comments, tears blurring my vision. It was bittersweet, how strangers could see what even Mark sometimes missed. The days blended. My world shrank to the size of the house, my schedule carved around Max's presence. I stopped caring what people thought. If I talked to Max in public, if I posted too many videos, if my house was a mess. He was my constant, my reason to get out of bed. Once, my friend Jenna called. I saw your TikToks. You and Max? Are you okay? I tried to laugh it off. He's just being weird, protective. I guess he knows I'm a mess. She paused. Maybe you should talk to someone. A therapist, I mean. I bristled, more defensive than I wanted to be. I'm fine, Jen. I've got Max. Silence. Then softly, I just don't want you to get lost, Sarah. Sometimes dogs can't fix everything. I almost told her she was wrong, but Max nudged my elbow as if he could sense my resistance. That evening, as dusk fell, I realized I'd stopped waiting for Mark's calls. I didn't even notice the time anymore. Instead, I lay on the living room floor, Max pressed along my side, and let the loneliness bleed away. The next morning, I woke to the sound of Max whining at the window. I peered outside, no sign of Mark, just the postman in his blue jacket. I opened the door, bracing for the cold, and Max dashed out, tail high. He chased after leaves, circled back, pressed his nose to my palm. We walked together up the street, and for the first time since Mark left, I felt a sliver of peace. Maybe I didn't need to be so strong all the time. Maybe it was okay to let someone else, someone with 4 legs and a wagging tail, carry me for a while. That night, I filmed one more video. I used to think I couldn't handle being alone. But Max has taught me something. Sometimes when you let someone else take the lead, even if they have paws instead of hands, you realize you're not alone after all. Maybe that's what love is. Maybe it's letting yourself be carried, even when you don't know how. As I pressed upload, Max climbed up beside me, curled into my side, and sighed. The world outside was still big and lonely, but inside this little house I was no longer afraid, and as I drifted off to sleep with Max's heartbeat against mine, I knew one thing for sure. He was more than just my shadow. He was the piece I'd been missing, until now. If I thought the world would leave us alone, me and Max curled up in our little bubble, I was wrong. It started as a joke. Friends texting me screenshots of my videos going viral, comments rolling, in faster than I could read. The tone was light, teasing, but every message stung a little, like a pebble in my shoe I couldn't shake out. Looks like Max is your new man. Careful, Sarah, Mark might get jealous. When the dog replaces the husband, you know you're in trouble. The first time I laughed, the second time I just smiled and scrolled past. But by the end of the week, even my mother called. Sweetheart, I know Max is a good dog, but you're not letting him sleep in your bed every night, are you? Her voice was gentle, concerned. I tried to play it off. Just while Mark's away, Mom. It helps me sleep. He's not going to replace my husband. She hesitated. Promise me you're okay. I promise. I lied. But was I? Sometimes it felt like Max was the only thing keeping the walls from closing in, and the more people pointed it out, the more defensive I became. What did they know about the long, echoing hours when Mark's voice was just a memory and my own? Thoughts grew too loud to bear. By Thursday, even Mark was making jokes. During our nightly call, hurried, pixelated, squeezed in between his meetings, he grinned, shaking his head. Is he treating you better than I do? He brings me my slippers, I joked. Maybe I need to step up my game. But there was a flicker in his eyes. Jealousy, maybe, or just the discomfort of being replaced in a way he hadn't expected. That night, after the call, I sat on the couch with Max curled against me, scrolling through the flood of comments on my latest live stream. In the video, I'd been laughing, filming Max as he blocked the front door with his body, refusing to let me leave for groceries until I bribed him with a treat. Viewers loved it. He's protecting you, Sarah. That's real loyalty. Who needs men when you have a dog like that? A few were harsher, strangers accusing me of being too attached, warning that dogs can't fill every hole. I closed the app, my heart pounding. Maybe they were right, but if needing Max was wrong, then I didn't want to be right. The pressure grew, quiet but insistent. My friends' group chat blew up with memes of women choosing dogs over boyfriends. My sister sent an old picture of us as kids, our family dog sprawled across her bed, and the message, "Some things never change." I started wondering if they pitied me, or if they envied how easy it seemed for Max and me. No misunderstandings, no silent treatments, no goodbyes. Late that night, as the wind rattled the window panes again, I heard footsteps on the porch. My heart jerked in my chest. For a moment, I thought it might be Mark, surprising me, coming home early. But it was just a package, dropped off late by a courier. Still, I jumped at every noise. I peered out the window at the shadows on the lawn, heart thudding. Max was instantly alert, nose twitching, body tense. He pressed his side against my leg and let out a low, warning growl. I locked the door, checked the windows, and finally, let myself breathe. Only when I slid down to the floor did I realize how much I'd come to rely on him, not just for company, but for safety. That night, I had a dream. I was running down a long hallway, doors slamming behind me, voices shouting. I stumbled, reached out, and found only Max beside me, his body blocking the darkness, his eyes steady on mine. I woke up gasping, tangled in the sheets, Max's face hovering close. He whined softly, licking the sweat from my brow, and I hugged him as if he were the only thing tethering me to earth. The days blurred together after that. My social media kept blowing up. I was invited onto a local radio show to talk about the comfort of dogs in lonely times. I almost said yes, then panicked at the thought of admitting in front of strangers just how much I needed Max. Instead, I posted a new video. You know you've reached peak dog mom when your dog refuses to let you out of his sight. And you're not even mad about it. The comments were a chorus of support and jokes, but also people sharing their own stories. When my husband left for deployment, my dog slept on his pillow for months. You're not alone, Sarah. Sometimes dogs really are our best friends. Their confessions made me feel less like a failure, more like someone surviving in the only way she knew how. But offline, the world crept in. My neighbor, Mrs. Hartley, stopped me as I collected the mail. You and that dog are inseparable, she said, voice warm but loaded with meaning. Your husband must have his hands full competing with a golden retriever. I laughed awkwardly, clutching the envelope tighter. Guess I'm just lucky to have them both, I said, but my cheeks burned. That night, Mark called earlier than usual. I put him on speaker so I could keep petting Max, who'd wedged himself against my thigh. You sound tired, Mark said. Didn't sleep well. He hesitated. Sarah, are you okay? You're not... I waited. Replacing me with Max, are you? I tried to laugh, but it sounded off. You know I could never. He sighed. It's just, you're everywhere online now. I can't open Facebook without seeing you and the dog. The guys at work are teasing me about it. I looked down at Max, who was snoring softly, oblivious to the tension. I'm sorry, it's helping, you know? I know, I just miss you, that's all. I closed my eyes. I miss you too. After we hung up, I stayed there for a long time, fingers curled in Max's fur. I wondered what would happen when Mark came home. Would Max still take his spot on the bed? Still shadow my every move? Or would things go back to the way they were? Me smiling for company, swallowing my fear in the dark, pretending I didn't need anyone. I realized with a start that I didn't want to go back. Not if it meant letting go of the safety and comfort I'd found in Max's presence. Later that evening, I went live on TikTok again. Max climbed onto my lap and laid his head on my shoulder as if he'd always belonged there. The comments flooded in. He knows you're his person. That bond is unbreakable. How will Mark ever top that? Someone asked. Aren't you worried your husband will be upset? I hesitated, reading the question aloud. Honestly, I don't know, I said, voice soft. But Max got me through some of the hardest nights. I think we all need someone, or something, that just won't leave, no matter what. After I ended the stream, I turned off the lights and listened to the house settle. Outside, the wind was picking up again, making the gutters creak. The world felt bigger than ever, full of expectations and judgments and the fear of losing what little security I'd found. But Max was there, steady, warm, real. He rested his head on my stomach and sighed, as if to say, let them talk. I closed my eyes, hand on his head, and whispered, I don't care what anyone thinks. I just don't want to be alone again. Max's tail thumped, and for the first time in days, I fell asleep easily, with my dog and my secrets, safe against the storm. Tomorrow, the world could keep talking. Tonight, I belonged to Max, and he belonged to me. If someone had told me 2 weeks ago that I'd dread my own husband's return, I'd have called them crazy. But as Mark's homecoming drew closer, my nerves twisted tighter, wound around every heartbeat. The calendar on my phone blinked with the reminder. Flight lands at 7:50 p.m. I read it again and again, searching for the old excitement, the flutter, in my chest that used to mean he's coming home. But all I felt was a strange, floating panic. Max sensed it. That last day, he stuck closer than ever, nudging my hand with his nose, sitting guard at the bathroom door, whining every time. I glanced at the clock. I pretended to keep busy, vacuuming, dusting, stacking dishes, but my mind was a whirlpool. What if things weren't the same? What if Mark came home and expected the old me, the one who'd fill his silence with easy chatter and never admit how much she needed someone else? What if Max refused to give up his place on the bed, his new role as my shadow, my confidant, my comfort, and, maybe worst of all, what if I didn't want him to? The hour before Mark's arrival felt like standing at the edge of a storm, watching. The sky bruised with thunder. I fussed with my hair, changed my shirt 3 times, checked my phone, and made Max sit for a treat just to distract myself. When the taxi finally pulled up, headlights sweeping across the frosted lawn, I froze. Max raced to the window, ears up, tail wagging, but uncertain. My hands shook as I opened the door. The cold air bit my cheeks, sharp and real. Mark stepped out, dragging his suitcase, face drawn with travel fatigue. For a heartbeat, he looked almost like a stranger. Then he saw me and smiled, tired but genuine. Hey, babe. I wanted to run into his arms, but Max beat me to it. He bounded down the front steps, barking wildly, circling Mark in joyful, frantic loops. Mark knelt, letting Max throw his paws over his shoulders, laughing as Max licked his face. All right. Missed you too, buddy, Mark said, eyes shining. Only then did he stand and open his arms to me. The hug was familiar, safe, warm, but awkward, as if we'd forgotten how to fit together. I clung to him for a moment, breathing in his scent, then pulled away, suddenly aware of how far apart we'd become. Inside, everything felt brighter, louder. Mark dropped his bags, looked around, and gave a low whistle. Place looks great. You've been busy, I shrugged. Keeps me sane. Max pressed between us, insistent, demanding both our attention. I saw Mark's smile falter just a little, caught the quick glance at the dog curled possessively against my leg. Dinner was strange. Mark talked about meetings and airport delays, telling stories that once would have made me laugh. I tried to listen, to respond in all the right places, but my mind kept drifting, to the feel of Max's fur under my hand, to the quiet moments when it was just me and my dog and no expectations. Max rested his chin on my knee, staring up at me as if reading my thoughts. When Mark reached for my hand, I startled, as if waking from a dream. Afterwards, Mark disappeared to unpack, and I let myself sag against the counter. The house buzzed, with new energy, a mix of hope and dread. Max whined, brushing against my leg. "Are we okay?" I whispered to him, tears stinging my eyes. "Can I have both, or will I have to choose?" Mark came back, rubbing his eyes. "You look tired." "Bed?" I nodded, dread and relief tangled tight. We climbed the stairs together, Max at my heels. Mark stopped at the bedroom door, frowning. "He's been sleeping with you, hasn't he?" I opened my mouth, then shut it. Max looked up at me, tail wagging hopefully. Mark sighed, softening. "It's fine. He can stay. I get it." Gratitude surged in my chest. I patted the bed, and Max leapt up, curling between us like he belonged there, which, in a way, he did. That night, as I lay in the dark, listening to Mark's slow breathing and Max's soft snores, I felt a peace I hadn't known in weeks. But underneath it was something else. A current of fear, of change, of not knowing how to move forward. The next day, the world pressed in again. Mark scrolled through my TikToks, shaking his head in disbelief at the thousands of comments. "You really went viral," he said, half smiling, half pained. "Didn't think you'd become a dogfluencer while I was gone." I tried to laugh it off, but there was an edge in his voice I couldn't ignore. "It helped me cope," I said, quieter than I meant. He nodded, running a hand through his hair. "I'm glad you had Max. I just wish you'd called me more." I didn't know how to say what I was feeling, I admitted, the words tumbling out. I was scared, of being alone, of being too much, of needing too much. Mark stepped closer, softer now. "You could have told me." I shook my head, tears threatening again. "It's not that easy. Sometimes it's easier to let the dog in than to let you see how much I'm falling apart." We stood there, the silence heavy but not angry. Max nudged my knee as if reminding me I wasn't alone in this conversation either. Mark smiled at that, the tension easing. "Maybe we all need a Max, huh?" That evening, we sat on the porch as the sky faded from blue to indigo, the air thick with the promise of rain. Max lay between us, head on my lap, eyes half closed. For a while, we just watched the world, no words, no pressure. Then, in a low voice, Mark asked, "Do you want to talk about it? About what it's been like? Just you and him?" I hesitated, but found myself nodding. And for the first time, I told him everything. The nights when the wind sounded like footsteps, the panic attacks that came out of nowhere, the way Max never left my side, never judged, never asked me to be stronger than I was. Mark listened, really listened. He reached out and took my hand, squeezing gently. "I'm sorry you felt like you couldn't tell me before, but I'm glad you had him. Maybe I need to learn from Max." We both laughed then. Real, relieved, bittersweet. Max wagged his tail, as if he understood. That night, we all climbed into bed together. Mark on one side, Max on the other, me in the middle. I fell asleep to the sound of their breathing, wrapped in warmth, feeling whole for the first time in my ages. But just before I drifted off, thunder rolled in the distance. My heart jumped, the old fear surging. Max lifted his head, nudged my cheek, and let out a soft, reassuring whine. Mark, half asleep, reached over me and rested his hand atop Max's. And in that moment, husband and dog, both anchoring me, I realized I didn't have to choose. I could be loved by both. I could be enough for both. If you'd told me a month ago that my dog would take my husband's place, I would have laughed. But now I know that sometimes the heart has more room than we think. And if the world wants to talk, let them. Because in this little house on this stormy night, I am exactly where I belong. End of story.